So I'm going to do a demonstration now to show you how we can do this. There's many different ways to interact with Git. We're going to, in this class, take advantage of a tool that exists on the Jupyter Hub that lets us use some point and click to interact with Git, but there's also command line tools, and if you like using those, you can do that as well. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go to github.com. Oops, where's my cursor? Okay, and when I go to github.com, I'm going to create a new repository. I'm just going to move this so I can see. And so I would start doing that by clicking plus and then new repository. And I have to give it a name. So I'm going to call this example just for fun. And then you can set whether or not you want to make the repository public or private. For me, this is an example. You can all take a look at it. I'm going to make it public, but you can have free private repositories as well. And I'm going to I'm going to have it start with just a basic file called a README that I can edit and play around with. So I'm going to say add a README, and then I'm going to click create repository. So now I have, basically you can think of this as like a folder on GitHub that I can edit, that I can add files to, and that has special functionality, so I can use Git to take it to the Jupyter Hub or to my laptop, add changes there, and send it back, okay? So let me just show you, so right now, this is my workspace, T-Timbers, and I have a folder now or a repository called example, and it has one file. So this, you can think of this as the file explorer. This is called readme.md. So I can edit this file. So I can just click on it using the pen tool here, and I can say the author is Tiff. Okay, so I'm the author of this. And then I scroll down to the bottom and I would click this green button to commit my changes. On the website, it skips over that git add file because it only lets you edit one file at once. Now, it gives a default commit message. I said we have to have messages that are useful. Update readme.md is not very useful. I don't know what I did. Yes, I updated readme.md, but if I use this commit message every single time I edit this file, it wouldn't give me any contextual information as to what I did. So I should use something, I should write a message that's more meaningful, like added the authorship. Okay, and then I would click commit changes. I can add new files also to this. If I go back, so right now I'm here in example, and then I'm in the README file. If I go back to the root of the project, I have some tools where I can add files. So I could create a new file here using GitHub's tools. And I could do something like, let's just create notes.txt and some notes for the project. And again, I scroll down and I could use the default message, but I'll, again, try good practices to put something more meaningful, even though this is a toy example. Added first note and click commit new file. Now I wanted to add the second file so that I can demonstrate that this is really going to be like your file explorer here, okay? So this now exists on GitHub, and if I wanted to start writing some code, this isn't the greatest place to start writing code because it has limited functionality for running the code. The Jupyter Hub has more functionality and that I can test and make sure the code works because it's expected before I share it with other people. So what's ideal then is that I take a copy of this GitHub repository and I move it to the Jupyter Hub. So to do that, I am going to click on this code button and I am going to copy this URL. Now there's three different options here for what the URL can look like. The one you want for the Jupyter Hub for just getting started is HTTPS, okay? So you wanna make sure this is highlighted, and then I can click this little clipboard to copy the URL. Then I'm gonna go over to our Jupyter Hub here, and I'm gonna go to the root of the Jupyter Hub, okay? So I'm gonna go all the way to the root here, and then there's a special button. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. It's not that much bigger, but we'll try. Up here, that once you're in the root, you can use to, what's very similar to what I talked about as a Git pull, but the first time you do it, we give it a special name. We call it Git Clone, okay? So the first time you take a copy of a repository from GitHub, to your local computer or the Jupyter Hub, we do a Git Clone. So I'm going to click this and I paste that URL in here and I click Clone. And that copies the repository to my working space. So here we can see example. So now I have a copy of the two files that I created on GitHub, notes.txt and readme.md. So I can open these files, I could edit them here and save them, and then go through the git add, git commit, and git push to send them back to Jupyter Hub. But what's more motivating and why I came here in the first place was so that I could create a Jupyter notebook with code and run it so that I can test that it works and then send it up to GitHub. So in this, I want to be inside of the root of my project. Now I want to use the launcher on Jupyter Hub to create a new Jupyter notebook. So that's the plus sign here. And then I'm going to click on, under the notebook heading, I'm going to click R for a new R notebook. And I'm going to start off with a markdown cell, my demo notebook. So I've created that and I hit Shift Enter to run the cell and get a new one. And then let's, print welcome to version control. Some very important code. Let's run our code and then maybe we'll do some, I don't know, library, tidyverse. Just to make sure we've got some code that's, running, okay? So this is as far as I'm getting for complexity with writing my very important code for my example project. I'm saving this here. And now let's send this code up to GitHub. So how do we do that? So on this Jupyter Hub, we have this Git extension tool over here on the left-hand side. So you can, once you're inside of this example repository, so you have to be inside of your repository on the Jupyter Hub, you click on it. And you'll see the different files here that we've got. Actually, I haven't really named it. So let's give it a better name than Untitled. Untitled's not a great name. So I'm going to go back to the File Explorer. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to rename the file code.ipynb. You want to give it a more useful name. Let's call it analysis. Let's actually rename important analysis .ipynb. And now I'll go back to the Git pane. And now I can see the files that exist, okay? So I have changed, there's a couple different files that look like they have been changed here, okay? There's these checkpoint files. You can ignore the checkpoint files, okay? So this is like a feature of Jupyter that we're not really using that is kind of version control-y-ish. So just ignore the checkpoint files. But the one that I meaningfully created and I want to send to Jupyter Hub is this important analysis.ipynb. So by clicking this plus sign, I'm doing the git add command, okay? I'm going to say, I would like to track this file. And you can see now that it's moved up to the staging area. So that's good. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to add a message here so that I can commit it, okay? So created code to print and load library. So I give it a useful message about what my change was about. And then only when I've typed a message in can I click the commit button. And I have to say who's done this. So Tiffany has done it. And you're supposed to associate an email with it. Okay, so now it has put these changes in the history. And if I go here and look at the history, I can actually see, hey, this is all the history and all the states of the project as I went through it. So there was the initial commit that you watched me create on github.com. This is when I added the authorship. This is when I added the notes.txt file. And then this is when I made that code file. Now, when I've done this last commit, it only still exists on my Jupyter Hub space. I still need to send it up to github.com to the remote repository, right? So if we go here and we take a look, I refresh this page, there's still no analysis code.ipynb, okay? I have to push those changes. So I go back to the Jupyter lab, and when you are in, again, the root folder, you have to be in the, in the Git panel, which means you have to be in the repository. The up arrow on the cloud here is your push. Send things up to the cloud, push up to github.com. And then if there were some changes that you needed to get from github.com that didn't exist here, that's when you would use this pull, the down arrow. So pull from the cloud down to your computer. So let's send up, let's push up to github.com, and it's going to ask you for some credentials. So I have a GitHub account that I'm using. And for you folks, if you want to go through this experience, the worksheet doesn't require you to do it, but the worksheet does guide you along through going through this. And I think you'll learn a lot more if you do it. You'll have to sign up for a free github.com account, and that's the credentials here that you would use. See if I can remember my password. And you can see that I use password managers, and they're all asking me if I would like to record that. Okay, so then I'm going to go over here and refresh that. And if my push happens successfully, now my important analysis ends up on github.com. And github.com does a pretty good job of actually rendering IPython notebooks. And we can see our code there. And this is a way that I can now share this with other people. Okay, so that's the demo of creating a repository, the basics of Git adding, committing, and pushing. One other thing I just want to show you that I think is pretty cool and motivating is the course textbook is this the right one? No, it's the wrong one. I want to go here. Is the GitHub repository for the course textbook that you're all reading, that Melissa and Trevor and I are writing. So this is our GitHub repository for the textbook. Like, we legitimately use these tools in our work for our analysis and for our teaching. So you can see that the file structure is a lot more complex for this project that's been going for a long time. And that we have, if you go into the history, so if you want to look at a history of a project, you go over here into the commits button, that we have a lot of commits here, and that these commits have for the most part, meaningful messages about what happened. And if I ever want to go back in time to see what this version looked like, I can click on these arrows here, and that will take me back in time. You can see the URL up here is a little bit different. Back in time, so I can see the state of all of the files and folders when of what the project looked like at this time. You can also go back and see, like, what exactly happened if I click on this this identifier, what changed with all the different files. So this is a very powerful and very cool tool. And what I've just demoed to you today is just like getting started with the functionality and the power of this version control tool. But we've got to start somewhere. So let's start with the basics. And yeah, I think that is the demo that I have to show you folks. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is stop the recording and stop sharing, and we're going to move into the breakout rooms.